is actually talking to the bees. So you can do a thing called calling the queen, where you just go to the front of the hive and you make a specific noise, and the queen will come to the front. If you've ever, it's very rare, but you can hear queen bees chirping. So they will like put out this kind of chirping noise, almost kind of like a cricket. So he's actually communicating with the bees. So there's a chance, a good chance, that there is some beekeeping wisdom that the ancient Egyptians had that we've just lost. We just don't know. And then that's obviously right now. That's one of our rooftop sites. That one's downtown. So we had a nice kind of view of the Kaufman and a beautiful sunset. And it's really rewarding to engage with something that humans have been doing for as long as we've been around, like as old, if not older than agriculture. So overall, we're going into the fourth year. And initially, my first idea with it was to just bring bees into the city. I had a lot of experience working with urban farmers from the restaurant industry. And then also my wife worked at Cultivate KC, which is a really wonderful nonprofit. And they work with a lot of small farmers. And, I mean, small farmers could use all the help they can get, pollination. And then the goal was to also just harvest as much honey as we could, give as much of it as we can to them. They can do whatever they want with it. So, they can jar it up and sell it. They can just keep it for themselves, whatever they want to do. No money's asked from anybody or time. So it's basically, we come in, set up the bees, do everything, and then, they benefit from it. And that was the initial goal. And then it started expanding out to educational campuses like this one. And we have an elementary school, which is really fun. And even now, there is a great organization called Shawnee Town 1929, and they have a working farm out in Shawnee, really fun to visit, but it was there 100 years ago. They have the original farmhouse, they have some of the structures, and the people there kept bees 100 years ago. So we're going to put some beehives there and try to be as historically accurate as we can, which isn't hard because the stuff hasn't changed that much. But we're going to do that, and so it'll be like a live learning experience and something that people can go see along with the chickens and the crops that are coming up. There's also a cemetery called Union Cemetery that's in Midtown, and it's the oldest public cemetery in Missouri. They have really cool old graves going back to the late 1700s, and they just want beehives in the cemetery. So I'm going to put some there, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So just, as an example of a few of our partners, campus has been amazing. I never thought that something like this would be possible. And it's all thanks to Eric and Sarah. They take a lot on for themselves just to do that extra little bit that makes a big difference. Because it would just be so easy to just, stick some plants down, water them, go about your day. But they're doing great things with the food gardens, native plantings, bringing the bees in, and it's a big deal. So Mimi's Pantry is a really, really wonderful food pantry. They have a few locations, and they have one big one with this working farm. They're going to be raising food, fruits. They've got this nice greenhouse there, and we put a bunch of beehives on the pantry land there. It's about 4 acres. And so their goal with it is to just take the honey, give it away through the food pantry. So last year it was really light because it was the first year. So we only got like 150 pounds for the pantry. Sounds like a lot, but we could do a lot more. And they just jarred it up and just gave it away. So it was along with their food. If you look them up online, it's amazing. Their setup is as nice as most grocery stores. So people can just come in, you register, you do your shopping, you check out. It's a really great thing. The middle is this place called Drum Farm. They're amazing. They're about 4 acres also, and they have a working farm, but it's a foster neighborhood. So they have kids that oftentimes have siblings in the foster system who would otherwise be broken apart, but they're allowed to go there, live in a house. Anybody can be a foster parent. You pass the checks and are certified or whatever, and you basically have this household and you can raise these foster kids, and they're on the farm, so they get to go out and work with things, have this green space. So it's basically probably the best case scenario for any, foster situation. And having an impact there is a really big deal. So we have about 15 hives on their farm, and they're really great. And I think most people I talk to never heard of Mimi's Pantry, never heard of Drum Farm. And so it's really good to be able to be involved with all of these organizations in a little way and then spread the word about them, which is nice. And then there's another one where it's just tucked away in the Pendleton Heights neighborhood, just kind of near the river. Really nice community there. And this lady named Whitney just took over this corner lot, totally unusable. It was an empty lot. Nobody was ever going to be able to build there. And they did a fruit orchard. And it's beautiful. It's like a great community space. And everybody there loves it. They support it. They're pulling in grants, so they're able to do some wonderful stuff. And so we have some hives there in the community orchard. And there's a lot of talk about third spaces and how we're really losing them. And this is an example of how to create a space for everybody, in your immediate surroundings. And they're fruit trees. Anybody from the neighborhood, just, go grab a peach. It's really awesome. So those are a few. And then since this is on the campus, I thought it would be good to talk about some health benefits of everything. Beekeepers live longer than everybody else. That's a fact. And, it's like we eat all the good stuff out of the hives. We're getting the exercise, fresh air. The bees have this calming vibration that, a lot of the more hippie woo-woo kind of people, say attunes you to nature. I think it does, but, I don't know if there's any research about that. So the honey, obviously, like antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, vitamins and minerals, 180 different compounds or more. It improves cholesterol, probiotics, safest food known to man, even good for wounds, burns. If you get a bee sting, you can rub honey on it and it feels better. It's just a miracle substance. And so raw honey, for those who don't know, means it is just out of the hive. They didn't heat it overly. They didn't filter it too much. So it's got the micropollen in there. They didn't break down any of the compounds. So look for raw and look for the smallest producer you can. Even grocery stores that you would think you can trust and labels you would think you can trust, they're testing them. There's corn syrup. There's other stuff in there. So you just never know. But the best way, support the small people, go to the farmers markets, pick up good honey. Pollen is really, really good for you. I say like a tablespoon a day, just have some bee pollen. You can put it on salads, you can put it in with a jam, you can mix it into a smoothie, you can do anything with it. It's full of good stuff. It's a lot of the same things in honey, but kind of supercharged. They're, the same minerals and vitamins. It's an immunity booster. All of these are even shown to be like stress reducers. They're just amazing. Let food be your medicine. One fun thing about the pollen is that the way to harvest it, because the bees, they go to the flowers, it sticks to their leg, they come back. You put a little gate in front of the hive entrance, they try to wiggle through it and it knocks the pollen off of their leg into a little drawer. And then you pull the drawer out, and then you have to sift through to sort out dirt, bee legs, whatever. But it's amazing for you. And they have it in most grocery stores now. So you can find it usually near the honey, but I recommend everybody have some. Also, obviously these two good for allergies. So if you have any allergies you're experiencing, a little bit a day is a really big deal. Most people don't know about propolis. So it's a like kind of weatherproofing that the bees make for themselves. It's tree sap, a little bit of saliva, pollen, I think a little bit of honey. They stick it everywhere. So if they feel a draft, if they think anything can move, they just pack it with propolis. Propolis is so good for you. So, it's got all the same benefits of that other stuff, but good for oral health. You can dry it and powder it. You can put it in an alcohol tincture. That's more uncommon. It's harder to find, obviously get it online, but if you keep bees, you can get as much as you need. They pack it everywhere. Old-time beekeepers like to just grab a big plug and chew on it. It's kind of like taffy almost. And then we've got royal jelly, which is incredibly expensive. Um, this is a queen cell. So if a beehive wants to raise their own queen, they put an egg in this larger cell. They feed it way more and allow it to reach full maturity before it emerges. And they feed it royal jelly, which they feed to all the bees, but regular bees only about 2 days. And the queen, they feed it, 8 days to a week, I think, or to 2 weeks. So anyway, if you're trying to harvest royal jelly, you get them to raise a bunch of queens by tricking them a little bit. And then once they've packed all the royal jelly into those queen cells, you take them out and you scoop the royal jelly out one by one. So that's why like a little jar of royal jelly will cost you, I don't know, $50 or whatever. Amazing for you. People use it on skin. It's, like anti-aging, like legitimately. And then the big one, which people at the university might know about, bee venom. Bee venom, it's been thousands of years of traditional medicine. It's great for rheumatic diseases, tons of active molecules, like just really, really good. And it may even have some anti-cancer properties. So like they're still studying it. They're finding out it can just do amazing things. People with arthritis or MS can keep bees and then just sting themselves on purpose. And it's a really great anti-inflammatory. It's got pain symptom helpers. And so very smart. So that's just some of the stuff. Everything out of the hive is a superfood. It's amazing stuff. So here's a little bit more, you can look it over. And we'll put the slideshow online. So if anybody wants to take a closer look. Then the other great thing that I think applies more to campus is green spaces. And we want to use the bees to foster those. Because even if you see a lot of grass and trees, there might not be that many pollinators around, like actual pollinators. They need space to lay their eggs. They need just the right materials and conditions. They need to not have a bunch of birds eating them. So bringing the bees in is nice because, more bees, more flowers for the rest of the pollinators, and they're all food for birds. So every site that I've put beehives at in the city, I've noticed more bird activity. All of the people I work with just say that it just boosts everything. The plants go, they get really good vegetables out of it. So, I think we all really know about how green spaces just help everybody. And I think, at a hospital and a university like this, it's a big deal. I mean, it can, boost your recovery times. Obvious stress, like reductor. So, I mean, it's just a really big deal. And the sad thing is, it's easy to cut budgets for. So, like, Sarah and Eric know, like, there are so many intangible benefits, but they are not immediately monetizable and they're easy to just put on the shopping block. So, it's the type of things that we really need to foster. And that's where organizations like us can come in and help out. One big thing that people talk about now is native pollinators versus honeybees. So you guys might have heard a little bit about that. There are hundreds of native pollinators in Missouri, hundreds of bees themselves, and like tons more butterflies and other insects like that. Some of them you might even think they're flies. Like if you notice a little green guy about that big, looks like a fly, it's a bee. They're, as big as, the biggest bumblebees and like as tiny as that. They're all bees, they all pollinate, and they're all really essential. So we have to keep up the plant diversity, but also the kind of insect life. Um, Mostly, the kind of sad thing is that honeybees have just been kind of used for agricultural purposes and pollination. And so have you guys heard about migratory beekeeping? Do you know that stuff? Yeah, nobody has. But basically all of the almond people, the citrus people, apples, anywhere, they've had to grow so much acreage that they've destroyed their own ecosystem. So, like they're pumping in the fertilizers and the pesticides, they're doing all this stuff. There's no actual bugs or birds there barely. So they hire beekeepers to truck their hives in while the flowers are coming out, plop them down, and then, pollinate. And then the beekeepers truck them out once they're done. The honey is just a byproduct. I was talking with an apple producer in Missouri just last week, and he's got a contract for a beekeeper to bring in 400 hives once a year, and he pays 20 grand for that. So beekeepers are making more off of that than they are honey. So I was even surprised by the 2/3 of hives statistic, because you hear all these news stories now where it's like the number of hives is increasing, so we're fine, right? Like they take one data point and then they extrapolate from that. But the fact is that the number of hives may be raising, but it's the number of hives being used for pollination because the growers have ruined their ecosystem because of big agriculture. And then hive mortality has risen. So even if there's more hives, there are more dying. And also, one of the big things is you can judge by honey production. Honey production has flatlined. So even if we have more hives, there's less honey being produced. And that's, so you have to take all these numbers against each other. So migratory pollinating is unfortunately like really essential now. And it's just a part of agriculture getting bigger and bigger. The really sad thing is there are certain areas of the world, like there are spots in China and other spots where they're having to hand pollinate. So they have people climbing trees with Q-tips, trying to hit every flower. And that's how they pollinate because there's no insects there. They're developing tiny little drones. So they'll have a solar hive that is, charging its great, lithium batteries with all the rare earth minerals, and then they're building these little drones, and the drones can go around and pollinate until they just, break and fall into the ground and then soak back into the rainwater. So it's just, it's crazy out there. And that's stuff that we need to really fight against. So hopefully, as the organization grows, we could also become like an advocacy thing where we can talk about these things, put them out there, and work maybe with placing hives. So like the guy who paid 20 grand to have 400 beehives, we might be able to match him with somebody who would keep bees there and not move them around, which moving them around is terrible for the bees. Spreads disease, they hate it, big stressor. So, there's a lot of potential for renewing current kind of threatened ecosystems. This is the biggest bummer. I think most people know, or hopefully they know, like we are in the 6th great extinction. There are extinction events going back through natural history. We're in one. Like all of our species are dying. So this is just some insects. And, there's actual data. It's very different for cities, country by country. One kind of fun, well, sort of fun one they do is a windshield test, where for decades, researchers would just drive the same roads and just count how many bugs splattered on the windshield. And it just decreased year over year. So the insects are the real canary in the coal mine, and they're practically invisible. People like it when there aren't more bugs around, right? So, it's a really dangerous spot to be in. And so, yeah, we got to help the polar bears, and it's kind of nice to have pandas, but we really, really need to help the insects. And that's what most people just don't even think about. These are some of the native bees in our region. And what we have here is a native bee home. The native bees are known as solitary. So that means every female is egg laying. They don't have a home or a colony or hive. They just go lay their eggs. They put a tiny bit of nectar and pollen in with the egg for when the larva develops, and then they just go about their day. That's it. Then the next year or a few months later, in some cases, the new one emerges, and that's it. So they really need help because they need a lot of spaces. One beehive like that one, that bee box back there, which you guys should take a close look at. They're really fun to watch. But that bee box, that whole box, upper and lower, probably has about 10,000 bees in it. A hive in the summer can have 80,000. Yeah, so 80,000 bees. Now they only live about 5 weeks, and they only fly out and pollinate for about half that time. So it sounds like more than it is, but it's still a lot. And all of these solitary bees, there's, just a handful of them. And if they suddenly lose a spot where they like to lay eggs, like say somebody sprays some pesticides or clears out some old logs or anything, that's it, they're done. They're gone. Those bees, they will go 4 or 5 miles if they have to find food and return to the nest. These ones will go maybe up to 1,000 feet. So you've got to have places for them to eat and to live. So again, one thing we'd like to grow into is building a lot more of those, giving them away, placing them around, and also just building habitats in unused spaces. There's a really cool program that some cities are doing. I've heard about it mostly in Europe, but there's massive swaths of land unused under power lines. So they have this project where they're taking the power line land. They're planting a bunch of native plants. They're putting in birdhouses. They're putting in little homes for the native insects. And it's just really, like boosting those environments where they are. And if you've been around Kansas City, you notice a lot of unused stuff, right? I mean, there's empty lots, there's little easements, there's spots where you could do a lot. So I think of it as just, we could start making a bunch of little oases all over the city, just here and there, and it would make a huge difference. So I would like to grow it basically into more than just honeybee hives. We're already doing a good bit of the native bee stuff and a lot of the education and talking to folks, going to schools. But there's so much potential for really growing and doing a lot more for the city, the state, whatever we can. So that's basically what I've got. A lot of people, anywhere I talk, always have a lot of bee questions, so I like to leave a lot of space for Q&As. So yeah, just thanks for having me here. I love having the bees on campus, and it's really fun to be able to just come out and chat with folks too. So if anybody has any questions at all.
So are you the main one that goes around to all the different hives, or do you have like a whole team, or what does your day look like trying to keep all these hives happy?
Yeah, I do everything. So, I mean, I've been beekeeping 13 years now, and I think until you hit 20 years, you're a beginner. So, it's a tough thing to train for. I think I top out at maybe 150 to 200 hives. Then I wouldn't have time to do anything else. But yeah, I go around, check them all. It's usually weekly throughout the year. So you check on them once a week. Certain times when there's a lot more pests, you want to be a lot more careful of them. And then in fall, getting them ready for winter is a big deal. So you might spend more time. And then in the winter, it's all about kind of refurbishing all the equipment. And there's a lot of that. So, it's like cleaning stuff, scraping wax, repainting, and then kind of making plans for spring. So that's the state I'm in right now. But yeah, it's the most fun because I mean, I'm either always with the bees or talking with people about bees, or like talking with kids about bees. It's a lot of fun. I've talked to 3-year-olds and I've been to retirement homes where there's been like 90-year-olds and everybody loves bees. Yeah.
Lifespan would be and what can you do to help them not become sick?
Oh, yeah. So the question is, what's the lifespan of a bee and what we can do to help them? It's really, really neat. So your regular worker bees, they will live for about 5 or 6 weeks in the warm months, 5 or 6 weeks. The fall bees are the same little worker, but they'll have to live 4 months, 5 months to get from fall to spring. So they go from 5 weeks to 5 months. The queen can live up to 5 years, but she's got a few productive years of like egg laying. So basically you've got the same little animal, lives for years, lives for a few weeks, and they just kind of regulate that on their own. And as far as helping them, obviously like planting everywhere, flowers, especially natives, helping the native bees is a big deal. Pesticides, there's lots of great ways to co-plant, which Sarah knows a lot more about, but plants next to each other can help reduce pests, natural pesticides that you can use. Start keeping bees yourself. It's a lot of fun. But also the native bee homes, the native bees don't defend them. So you can do a little research. They're fun to build on your own. You can put any number of them in a garden and they will really like boost what you've got going on too. So yeah, native bee homes, more flowers and plants, no pesticides.
Curious how you got started in this field, what made you interested in starting this path for your career?
Yeah, so the question was how I got started. And the first time I was around bees was with my uncle about 13, 14 years ago. And he is in California and he had a bunch of beehives. And so he said, let's go check out the beehives. You know, he had to do some maintenance on them. And so I put on the suit and went out there and it just gets in your head. You can't stop. And so since then, I always had them. As far as career, I would never say I've had anything that could be called a career. So like, you know, went to college, didn't get much of a degree, went into restaurants, worked my way up, and then quit, and then wanted to do bees professionally in some aspect. But if you do it professionally, like I said, you have to have, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of hives. You have to be trucking them across the country. You don't get to like the image of somebody who just has a bunch of beehives, makes honey and sells it at markets is still around a little bit, but it's dying, just like small farmers. So I wanted to do it in a way that you could do it on a small scale, but also have some kind of impact. And so living in the city, you know, not wanting to go to the country multiple times a week and just, you know, wanting to get out there and see what I could do.
All right. Oh, one more
I have
question.
a
Yeah.
question. Remember reading something a few years ago about beekeepers that were placing hives in people's yards and taking care of them, or at least teaching them how to take care of them. Is there anything like that going on now that you're aware of?
I've not heard of anything like that. You know, city to city, there are all sorts of different organizations, but the way I structured this was something that kind of just occurred to me. I haven't heard of anybody doing something like this. It is something I hope to do, because obviously, like, I have to focus on sites where we can have, you know, 6 to 20 hives. The travel time is a big deal. But there's so many people out there who want some hives and don't necessarily want to maintain them, or, you know, it takes a lot of time to learn. But I also get tons of emails from people who live in apartments or just don't have the yard space, or they're in an HOA, they want to keep bees. So what I want to do is create some kind of a hub where like prospective beekeepers can meet people who want some hives on their property. So it could be, you know, something like that. So yeah, hopefully that's in the offing. I have a good list of emails on both sides of the chain. So maybe, you know, I might post about it on the Instagram or send out regular updates with the newsletter of contacts to connect people with people.
Sure.
No, if you look up BKC, the Instagram is at BKCMO, but BKC pretty easy to find everywhere, and all the contact stuff goes to me.
Also have a question from Stacy online. She wanted to know what's so special about the honey from New Zealand.
Oh yeah, so Manuka honey is the most expensive honey in the world. It only comes from New Zealand, and I think it's maybe the linden tree or some type of tree that's only there. So the bees visit these trees, they make Manuka honey. I don't know if the research is perfect, but it's one of the most healthy honeys you can have. You know, there's a lot of benefits to it. And just the fact of it coming from only one spot in the world, and then also really good marketing has made it, you know, pretty notable. There are some, you know, I want to get some Manuka honey and try it, but I don't necessarily trust the stuff in the grocery store. Like you see it in Whole Foods, who's to say what it is, you know? It says Manuka honey, they'll charge you $30 for a little jar of it, but, you know. There's heather honey in Scotland that I really want to try that is supposedly like just really dark and thick like molasses. And that's also supposed to have a lot of good medicinal qualities. There are some really weird African honeys where it's a slightly different type of bee and they visit different plants and the flavor is totally different. But one fun thing that I do that anybody should do is like honey never goes bad. So anywhere I go, I get it. people travel to give some to me, so I have a shelf at home with just, 100 different types of honey. Fun to sample.
I think now it'd be good to move on to like the panel session. So can I have the mic? I
Yeah.
think we're just gonna have to pass it around. Unfortunately. Let's try to set up. I think I'll just start with having each one of you introduce yourselves, so just your name and what organization you're part of, what you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Norris. I am the Community Gardens Program Manager with the Landscape Department. We have a botanic gardens, and what I do falls underneath that. So I work a lot with vegetable gardens, and I do a lot of community outreach and education. And side note, well, the mission of the Botanic Gardens is to explore the critical role that plants and nature play in our lives. That's the food we eat, the medicines we take, and our mental and emotional well-being. And that's where a lot of this stuff comes in and while we work with David. The bees are so important to us in our gardens, and they help pollinate a lot of stuff. Are we doing slides now or just? Part of my job, we do a lot of garden tours. So if anyone is interested throughout the season, you can always reach out to us at gardens@kumc.edu if you and your department want to just have a talk and walk around the gardens and find out about why we are doing and what we are doing. This is a slide, a graphic online that's really popular that I always like to point out the importance of the bees. We don't realize it. We're so used to seeing all this food in the produce section, but without our bees, more than half of what we're used to seeing is not there. Basically, any of the stuff that's not there is pollinated by the bees, and they have flowers, and that's how the pollination happens. And so a lot of the produce that we're used to eating just wouldn't exist. Next slide. And then I am here to give you guys the excuse to be a lazy gardener. We are all told and taught that come fall, we should rake up all those leaves, we should clean up everything, we should make everything all neat and tidy, and that is not at all what we should be doing. If we want our pollinators to survive and be able to support us with the food in the produce section, we need to let it be. You need to be okay with tolerating a messy garden. A lot of the native bees, a lot of ground bees, a lot of our pollinators actually live in the ground. They live in this leaf litter. And then this is actually another example of the native bee houses that David was talking about. These little cardboard tubes mimic our native plants. A lot of native plants have a hollow stem, and this is what native bees will also lay their eggs in. So when you cut up all of your plant stuff in the garden, you're actually getting rid of next year's baby bees. So don't do anything in the fall, just be lazy. And then come spring, you want to wait until it's about 50 degrees or so, which is usually about late April around here. That's when you can start cleaning stuff up, but it's still okay to leave some of those leaves in the ground. It's good. It's a good nutrients for your soil. But when you do cut any plant material, just cut it down to about 15 inches. Leave the bottom 15 inches. Everything else can go away into your compost pile at that time. And then you have pollinators for the next year. Next slide. And then one of the things that we are trying to do here on campus, we do in our own yards as well, is increasing diversity in our gardens. So flowers are super important, but it's not just flowers, but our native plants as well. Plants flower at different times of year, so they don't all flower at the same time. So the more diverse selection of plants you have in your gardens, the more opportunities there are for all of our native bees and our honeybees to collect pollen. And this is just a good graphic that shows different plants flowering at different times of year. And it's, it makes for a prettier garden too.
This be in the shared presentation too?
Yeah,
Just so we get that.
Smart.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Elises. I'm with the Office of Student Life, and we also manage the Thrive Food Pantry on campus. So for those of you that aren't familiar, this is our food pantry that's open, a free open resource for all students, and we rely heavily on our partnership with the gardens and the bees that we have on campus. So we provide kind of canned goods, shelf-stable foods, but we also work with Sarah and the gardens team to provide fresh produce for a large chunk of the year. This last year, they were able to harvest almost 1,900 pounds of produce, which was amazing, in big part with having the bees on campus too. So we really benefit from that, rely on that, and really focus on not just providing kind of the base level of food on shelves, but also working toward a goal of healthier and fresh produce for our students on campus as well. We do serve a large portion of the student population too. So this last year, we saw over 400 students utilize the pantry throughout the year for over 2,700 times that they visited the pantry. So we're busy, especially in our summer months when we have our produce. So we just love the partnership, and it's so important to what we do on campus.
Thank you both. I think you studied the questions I had for you too well, so you've pretty much already gone through them. So now we just have Dr. Love, and we can switch to her slide she had to share. Real quick. I think you have to go. Is anybody on Zoom to see if this is sharing by chance? Check the chat. Can those on Zoom tell us if you can see some new slides? Yes, you can see Dr. Love's slides. Perfect, thank you.
It's the video. There you go.
Okay, of course they are. I got this. Okay, screen one. All right, I think everyone should.
Okay, so my name's Marissa Love. I'm a physician. I'm actually an allergist with a special interest in food allergy. And I have been working with Sarah Norris and Eric Toe for about a year or so in our culinary medicine initiative here on campus. And this is initially an educational project for our students. It's interprofessional. We study cooking skills, fresh produce and vegetables, eating healthy, as well as equitable access to fresh food and vegetables. And then starting this summer, I'll be helping with the Lifestyle Medicine Certificate of Distinction for medical students. So, apitherapy and culinary medicine. So we talked a lot about the bees. Bees are essential to our planet. So as David and Sarah have already mentioned, they are the primary pollinators that transfer pollen between plants, essential for plant reproduction. It encompasses pollinating for about 85% of all food crops for humans. So that's, a $15 billion industry. And who knows what kind of pollinator they are? Does anybody? So it's an insect. It's an insect pollinator, which means that it lands on the flower and it moves flower pollen from one, plant to another, which is different from wind pollination, which is why my job exists, because allergens from weeds and grass and trees, those are wind pollinated. So while you do get a little bit of allergens from plants like trees and grasses and weeds. A little bit of allergen from that, from just like sheer contact with the bees and the honey. You're not getting a whole lot. So that old adage where people said, "Oh, you should eat and drink honey on a daily basis for your allergies," you may not be getting as much benefit. You are definitely getting some nutritious benefit, but not from the allergic standpoint, because flower pollen is insect pollinated. Okay, so the big question, we talked about bees. We know why it's important. We want to do something about this. We're all folks that want to help out, especially because we're in medicine. So what if there were no bees? So you wouldn't have medicinal plants, right? You wouldn't have bee balm, lavender, thyme, rosemary. Who can imagine Italian food without rosemary? You wouldn't have calendula. That's that skin healing, the wound healing effects that David was talking about. You wouldn't have anise. These are all plants that rely heavily on bee pollination, insect pollination. Now, well, that's all great and all, but I'm a physician. I don't have to deal with this naturopathic piece. I prescribe medicines. So did you know aspirin comes from willow bark? And willow bark is a type of tree that requires pollination. So what if we didn't have aspirin? That'd be a problem. What if we didn't have digoxin or digitoxin from foxglove? What if we didn't have anti-malarial drugs that were derived from quinine from the cinchona tree, or opium? What if you had to have a surgery and you couldn't have any narcotics? That's a problem. Who's birthed without can't talk. An epidural? Who's birthed without an epidural? Kudos to you. How many non-female, non-pregnant women have carried around 15 pounds on your stomach for 9 months without pain medicine, so that you could experience what it's like for your partner to be pregnant and then deliver? Like, could you imagine if I delivered a 10-pound baby? I would want 2 epidurals. So, narcotics from poppy seed, paclitaxel is an anti-chemo drug from Pacific U, and then anise is used in a lot of GI and respiratory issues. So this is used in modern medicine. We need plants. We need plants to produce well. In order for it to produce well, we need bees. We need an ecosystem. We need climate change. So let's take this a little bit further. What if we have no aspirin, no digitoxin, no narcotics, no paclitaxel? What are we going to see? Uncontrolled cardiovascular disease, uncontrolled clotting conditions, increased chronic pain and uncontrolled inflammatory states, more malaria because we can't treat it, and uncontrolled cancers, excuse me. Paclitaxel, an anti-chemo drug, is first-line treatment for lung, breast, ovarian, head and neck cancer, and it's also used for relapsed non-Hodgkin's. So what if we don't have any of that? Life would be very different. Okay, so what are things that bee pollination really helps with? So berries, the fruits, like David had mentioned, citrus fruits. Who loves watermelon? Absolutely, watermelon, it's important. If you don't have watermelon, if you don't have bees to help your produce with watermelon, it's not gonna look so great. It's not gonna taste very good either. Cucumbers, pumpkins, squash, all good things for us, right? Well, yeah, that's nice, Dr. Love. I can eat healthy. I can find other ways to eat. But remember what I said, it's $15 billion of crop that's pollinated by bees. So imagine going to the grocery store and you can't find produce. It's scarce. Imagine that you're working a double shift and you cannot get to the big box grocery store and you get there and there's no produce there. How frustrating is that? Like, for example, my patients that have food allergy and food restrictions, they can only eat certain things, but not all grocery stores have it. So not only are they going to one big box grocery store, going to the natural grocery store, and then they're going to another grocery store to find what they need. So imagine life like that, where food scarcity is an issue. So who knows what this is? This is a mouth. It has some teeth. And there's something going on up there, right? So this is a gingivitis in the mouth, and this happens when you don't get enough vitamin C. So this is what they used to call like a sailor's mouth, etc. So if you don't get enough vitamin C, you'll get gingivitis. I've only seen one case of this, fortunately, and you can have pretty bad gingivitis from it. You can lose your teeth. So can you imagine what life would be like if you couldn't chew on things? So where do we get vitamin C from? You get it from berries. You get it from citrus fruit. And it's important in immune function and collagen production. So if you don't have enough of it, you're at risk for scurvy. Melons are important for vitamin A. If you don't have enough vitamin A, you have vision problems. Leafy greens are important for folate. You'll have problems with anemia. And if a pregnant lady doesn't have access to folate supplement or eat enough folate, their kid will have birth defects. Fruits and vegetables obviously are good for antioxidants. So again, what if there were no bees? Decreased availability of fruits and vegetables would go down, price would go up for fresh foods and vegetables, potential malnutrition because of food scarcity and having to, get all this specialized food and have it imported, reduced access to essential nutrients, and then bam, we're in a food security crisis. Who remembers the days during COVID where like shelves were empty? Imagine that times 15 billion. So I'd like to just have you all think about this and why it's important for our medical center, and think about how you can take this back to your department and encourage folks in your department to support local, support the bees, support fresh produce, and health equity. And I won't leave you with all doom and dire. So how can you cook with it? So this is honey garlic salmon, and you can use honey as a sweetener to help add a little bit of flavor in your recipes, and it's actually healthier than using actual sugar. And if you want the recipe code, it's on the side there. And should you be interested in more of these efforts, feel free to one, email me, and then two, scan to give feedback, because I love getting feedback. And then I don't know if David, you know that this is you. And he was teaching my allergy fellows and a geriatrician and some high school students about the bees, and we got up close and personal and got to taste the honey straight out of the hive, and it was amazing. So with that, I will leave it with Reagan.
Thank you guys so much for all that helpful information. For the sake of time, we probably need to start wrapping up, but if there's any, last questions you have for the panel. Okay, good. So our plan, today the goal was to kind of get the conversation started about the importance of having the bees on campus. And we're hoping to kind of jumpstart some initiatives soon, like through the Launch KU endowment fundraising program. So please keep an eye on your inbox for that, more information about that. And then we will share some QR codes from David that you can use to donate to BKC, which will directly support his hives here in Kansas City, especially on campus. And then those in person, he brought some wonderful goods of his, but otherwise, thank you so much for coming. I'm so thrilled with this turnout. I'm so glad everybody also really appreciates BKC's work on campus. And thank you again to our panelists.